Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist on October 24th, 2025, from Amman, Jordan. Yesterday, on the day after Israeli officials barred me from entering Palestine from Jordan, I was arrested in Amman and spent the afternoon in a Jordanian jail cell. In this episode, I'm going to explain to you what happened, but I'll reserve that discussion for the second half of my report today. The first half of this report will be devoted to what is happening in Palestine, which is infinitely more important than my spending a few hours in a Jordanian jail cell. The most pressing question by far for the Palestinians at this moment in their history is, has the genocide been brought to an end? And the short answer to that question is a definitive no. However, the intensity of Israel's genocide has certainly decreased dramatically. In effect, Israel has gone from genocide plus to genocide light, but it's still a genocide. So here is the Gaza Health Ministry's report on daily casualties for yesterday, October 23rd, and this is published on the Resistance News Network Telegram channel. You'll see that the ministry reported 14 martyrs, but only one of them was killed as a result of direct targeting by the genocidal forces of Israel. 13 were retrieved from the rubble, and there were 2 injuries that arrived at Gaza Strip hospitals in the prior 24 hours. The total death toll, and this is, of course, as I've said and explained many times, as have others, the number being given here by the Gaza Health Ministry is simply the number of uh, 1,375 injuries. That is well above 10% of the pre-genocide population of the Gaza Strip. Since the ceasefire, which came into effect on October 11th, the Gaza Health Ministry reports that Israel has killed 89 people and injured 317, and that a total of 449 bodies were recovered from the rubble. Now, importantly, vitally importantly, the Gaza Health Ministry did not report any deaths from starvation yesterday. It's important to understand that, or to recall, that prior to the beginning of the ceasefire, Israel was killing anywhere from between, in general, it was killing between 65 and 100 Palestinians per day in the Gaza Strip and injuring hundreds more, again, per day. So one death and 3 or 4 injuries in a 24-hour period is, of course, a drastic reduction in the death toll and in the injury rate. And also, in the weeks leading up to the ceasefire, the Gaza Health Ministry often reported several deaths per day from starvation. And as I've indicated, none were reported on the 23rd. And just so that you can see that this is not, what happened yesterday is not unique since the ceasefire came into effect, I've also put up on the screen the health ministry's report for the prior day, October 22nd. You'll see on that day there was again 1 martyr due to direct targeting by the occupation, 4 recovered from the rubble, and 4 injuries had arrived at the Gaza Strip hospitals in the prior 24 hours. And on that day also, the Gaza Health Ministry did not report any deaths from starvation. Now, let me remind you that the actual death toll is likely to be, at this stage, far in excess of 100,000, and it could be several 100,000. And the only way that we'll know for sure is to allow, first of all, to remove entirely Israel's forces, to stop entirely the violence, and to allow international experts, investigators, and the media, international media in particular, into the Gaza Strip without hindrance, so that they can scour the entire territory and determine exactly how many people have been killed, at least to the best of their ability. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It would not at all surprise me that in areas that are inaccessible for the time being to the Palestinians and to outside observers, the Israelis have created mass graves. Certainly, that would not be beyond them at all. So the death toll since October 11th has averaged 7 killed and 24 injured per day. No rational and fair-minded person would call that a ceasefire. This isn't just an accidental death here or there. 7 killed per day and 24 wounded per day is a significant and sustained violation of Israel's obligations under the ceasefire. And it's not just with respect to the attacks on the population, the devastated population of the Gaza Strip, that Israel is violating the ceasefire on a daily basis. It's also with respect to its commitments on humanitarian aid that Israel is violating the ceasefire on a daily basis. On October 21st, Gaza's government media office reported that up until that date, only 986 aid trucks had entered Gaza since the ceasefire began, far below the required number of 6,600 aid trucks. The daily average from October 11th was a mere 89 trucks compared to the requirement, the agreed number of a minimum of 600 per day. The limited entry, said the government media office, quote, reflects the occupation's continued policy of strangulation and humanitarian extortion against the population of Gaza, close quote. In addition, criminal Israeli settlers continue to run riot in the occupied West Bank, and one of the many major flaws in this ceasefire agreement is that it said absolutely nothing about Israel's crimes in the West Bank. So one example of settler violence is that on October 22nd, Zionist settlers attacked a child in the West Bank. And here you see a photograph of the child receiving treatment from Palestinian medics. Her name is Juri Mohammed Badawi Dababshe. She was injured after Zionist settlers attacked her while she was heading to Al Tuwana School in Masaferiyata, south of Al Khalil in the occupied West Bank. And even worse than this, she was gathering olives on her land. This occurred on October 20th. And by the way, these two incidents are by no means an exhaustive list of what has happened, what these settlers have done to the Palestinians since October 11th. What you see up there on the screen is a portion of an article published by the BBC on October 21st. According to the BBC, the attack took place on Sunday morning in the Palestinian village of Turmas Aya in the occupied West Bank and was captured on video by U.S. journalist Jasper Nathaniel. Mr. Nathaniel said the settler knocked the woman unconscious with his stick before hitting her again. The savage hit her again as she lay on the ground. She has been named as Afaf Abu Alia, known locally as Saleh. The Israeli genocide forces told the BBC in a laughable statement that the confrontation, that's how the BBC described it, was dispersed after Israeli forces arrived, and that the genocide entity strongly condemns any form of violence by settlers. Meanwhile, it's doing absolutely nothing to hold them accountable and oftentimes protecting them and facilitating their crimes. Notably, the BBC described the attack as unprovoked, as if a 55-year-old Palestinian woman gathering olives on her own land might have provoked this barbarian, a young Israeli who was masked and brandishing a wooden club. Did I mention how disgusting the BBC is? Finally, on October 22nd, the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Commission reported that over 9,100 Palestinian prisoners remain in Israel's dungeons and torture camps. They face severe detention conditions, ongoing repression, and systematic medical neglect. So for all of these reasons and more, it's abundantly clear that the genocide is far from over. There has simply been a dramatic reduction in the intensity of Israel's genocide. While that is vitally important and good news, this is an ongoing campaign of extermination, torture, oppression, and dispossession of the Israeli entity with the full backing of Western governments. Now, Israel recovered all its living POWs more than 1 week ago. So it may surprise many of you to learn that it has murdered only 2 Palestinians in the past 2 days, uh, which raises the question, why is this murderous regime showing such uncharacteristic restraint? Well, it appears that the reason is Donald Trump. The Times of Israel just reported that if Netanyahu fucks up the ceasefire, Trump will fuck up Netanyahu. And you'll see here that this is a report based upon an unnamed U.S. official who spoke with Israel's Channel 12 News, and correspondent Barak Ravid, I believe he's with the Times of Israel, speaking. No, I'm sorry, he's speaking there on the Channel 12 network in Hebrew, said that a U.S. official told him, quote, Netanyahu is walking a fine line with President Trump. If he keeps going, he'll fuck up the Gaza deal. And if he fucks up the deal, Donald Trump will fuck him. No shortage of colorful language coming from the Donald nowadays. Now, this could, of course, be nothing but kabuki theater. We've talked at great length in this program, going through example after example of how the Western regimes and the U.S. administration in particular, because it is the biggest supporter by far of the genocidal entity, routinely leak to the press that the president or some prime minister, but usually it's the president of the United States, is angry or frustrated or outraged by something that Israel did or that Netanyahu said. And yet somehow the weapons keep on flowing. And never is there any kind of a threat accompanying these reports of frustration or anger with the war criminal Netanyahu to withdraw U.S. support from the genocidal entity. However, this time, surprisingly, there is such a threat, and it is quite explicit. Here you see a report from the Jerusalem Post, which is based upon an extensive interview that the Donald gave in the last few days to Time magazine. And Trump told the Trump told the Time magazine that, quote, Israel would lose all of its support from the United States if it annexed the occupied West Bank. And Trump goes on to say, it won't happen because I gave my word to the Arab countries, it being the annexation. And the background to this is that various criminals in the Knesset put forward a piece of legislation which would formalize, for purposes of Israeli domestic law, the annexation of the occupied West Bank. That would be a flagrant violation of international law and have no validity in international law. But since when did that stop the genocidal Knesset? In addition, when asked about the possibility of Marwan Barghouti being a top candidate to lead a Palestinian state, Trump told Time magazine that it is his question of the day, and he'll be making a decision. You may recall, as we've reported recently and on several occasions, that according to polling, Marwan Barghouti would handily win an election for the presidency of the Palestinian Authority, were one to be held with Mahmoud Abbas, the current president whose term expired long ago and who is deeply reviled by the vast majority of Palestinians, and the Hamas candidate. The numbers, which came out of a May 2025 poll done by a reputable polling firm in occupied Palestine, is that 50% of Palestinians living under occupation would vote for Barghouti, and somewhere in the range of 38% would vote for the Hamas leader at that time, and a lowly 11% would vote for the current corrupt collaborator, Mahmoud Abbas. Now, to drive the point home that Trump wants to preserve the two-state delusion, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told the media upon arriving in the genocidal Israeli entity that the Knesset legislation formalizing the annexation of the West Bank is stupid.
Oh yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was sort of confused by that. Now I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was so weird. I'm so confused by it. I mean, this is the vice president of the United States, or is he a high school student? I mean, the incoherence and psychobabble of these senior officials in the Trump regime never ceases to amaze me. But as you heard, he was quite definitive at the end of that commentary that the Trump regime will not tolerate Israel's annexation of the West Bank. Note that he didn't say anything about the West Bank becoming a key portion of a future Palestinian state, nor did he say anything about Israel stopping its settlement expansion. He certainly didn't say anything about Israel dismantling its current settlements. And therefore, we can say with some confidence that the so called two state solution does indeed remain a delusion. So I want to be very clear about this, because yesterday when I commented on this, and my comment on this firm rejection by the Trump regime of the formal annexation of the West Bank was that this is evidence of the power that Israel or that the United States exercises over Israel. It's not rocket science to grasp that when one state or government or regime is entirely dependent for its very existence on the support of another, that other, the one that's providing the support, is going to have vast leverage over the recipient of that existentially important support. And I've been saying for months that all it would take is a phone call from the US president to bring an end to the genocide. And so here you see evidence of the leverage that the United States government exerts over Israel, because the reports are that the prime minister's office, the war criminal Netanyahu, is himself opposed to the legislation. And apparently, so too are most members of his cabinet. And interestingly, the Times of Israel reported yesterday that because of the commentary that's coming out of Trump and J.D. Vance, this legislation working its way through the Knesset is quote unquote highly unlikely to pass. Now, yesterday when I expressed this view, there seemed to be some misunderstanding about what I was saying. Some people took my comments to mean that I believe that Donald Trump is going to force Israel to give the Palestinian people a state which would encompass the occupied West Bank. I believe no such thing. Although I do believe that the Trump regime is showing signs, very distinct signs of feeling pressure from various quarters, I've seen no evidence yet that Trump is actually willing to go that far. So at this stage, I think what we can say with some confidence is that Trump is determined to at least maintain the illusion that the two-state solution, as they call it, remains on the table. Now, before I move on, I want to show you some additional information that emerged from Donald Trump's interview with Time magazine. And you can see here a post on X from DD Geopolitics, who caught this zinger. Trump admitted that he was in on the pager attack and overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. In a Time interview, Trump admitted direct involvement in the Israeli pager attacks that killed Hezbollah leaders. And there, in that post, DD Geopolitics has pasted an excerpt from the transcript of the Time magazine interview. And the question was, you've been in office for less than a year, Mr. President, the second term, and the region has already been transformed. Hezbollah's leadership has been decimated. Bashar al-Assad has been replaced by a government seeking normalization. And Trump says, as you know, all of those attacks were done in auspices with me directly. So there he's appears to be referring to the attacks in Lebanon and Syria. But then he says, with Israel doing the attacks with the pagers and all that stuff, so they had a look, Israel's been very respectful of this country, and they let me know everything. Now, quite apart from the fact that Trump, too, can't seem to string together a coherent sentence, the admission that Israel lets him know everything undoubtedly means that Israel, as we've been saying, and so many military experts have been saying, that Israel told him in advance that it was going to attack Qatar and attempt to assassinate in Doha the Hamas negotiating team. It would also mean that Israel kept Trump fully informed of its intentions to bomb Iran only hours before representatives of the Iranian government met with representatives of the Trump administration, or were supposed to meet, to continue so-called negotiations over Iran's nuclear enrichment program. One of the most unusual aspects of Trump is that he is a habitual liar. He lies as easily as he breathes. He will do it with audacity, with supreme confidence, with arrogance. And all of a sudden, he'll just blurt something out which exposes a whole series of pernicious lies. I think another example of that, by the way, is, Donald Trump, one of the most relentless lies he's been telling us all the way back from the presidential campaign last year is that he's committed to peace. And he wants to be the president who brings wars to an end. And he avidly covets the Nobel Peace Prize and blah, blah, blah. And amidst all of this talk about peace, the Trump regime renamed the office of the Secretary of Defense the Secretary of War, which tells you pretty much all you need to know about the military posture of the United States. Now, before I tell you what I think is going on here with all of this, talk about Trump fucking up Netanyahu and pulling U.S. support, and J.D. Vance saying that the annexation legislation is stupid, I want to share with you an observation from an excellent Palestinian commentator, Mohammed Shahada. This is a post by Mohammed on X on October 22nd, and he's commenting on a DropSite News article which reports that Jared Kushner, I gotta tell you, man, that man annoys me to no end. I don't even regard him as a man. He's kind of a man-child with an evil, sinister, clueless look on his face. Kushner confirmed reconstruction in the Gaza Strip will begin only in areas of Gaza under Israeli control, saying, quote, no reconstruction funds will be going into areas that Hamas still controls, close quote. He described plans for a new Gaza built and secured by an international force to provide Palestinians with blah, blah, blah. Now, as Mohammed astutely comments, there are 0 Palestinians in the 58% of Gaza under Israel's control, except IDF proxy gangs, Abu Shahab and company. This is not reconstruction, it's propaganda. If you think about it for a moment, he's undoubtedly correct. I mean, let's imagine that the Israelis and their Western backers and the Arab autocrats pour billions of dollars into reconstructing those parts of Gaza that are currently physically occupied by Israel's genocide forces, where there are virtually no Palestinians, and begins to construct this opulent, casino land. Do you actually think they're going to bring the Palestinians from the devastated part of Gaza that remains under Hamas control into this opulent casino land to live? I mean, they might allow a few in to serve as waiters and, waitresses and busboys and janitors. Maybe they'll need some people to do the menial work for the affluent Westerners and Israelis who come and live and work and play there. I doubt they'll even do that. As a matter of fact, that'll become another extension of the Israeli apartheid regime. They're not going to allow Palestinians from the devastated part of the Strip back in. They're not in any significant numbers. So, really, what this so-called Reconstruction plan is designed to do is to settle Gaza with Jewish people, which is exactly what the stated intention of the more fanatical members of Israel's criminal cabinet has been for virtually the entirety of the genocide in the Gaza Strip. That's what's going on here. Now, why is Trump nonetheless going through these hoops of telling the press, either directly or through proxies, that he's going to fuck up Netanyahu and he is going to pull all U.S. support if Israel formalizes the annexation of the West Bank? And why are they putting on this big show of reconstructing Gaza and putting together an international security force for Gaza and so forth? Well, I think the short answer is there's a tremendous amount of pressure being applied by various means and from various sources on Israel and on the Trump regime and other Western backers of Israel. First and foremost, perhaps, is the military pressure. Israel's army, as I've said repeatedly, is a mess. It is demoralized, discredited, depleted, defeated, and it desperately needs an opportunity to recover, recuperate, and resupply. And of course, many of its soldiers, tens and tens of thousands of them, will never recover because they are permanently disabled or are suffering from severe PTSD. And that's one source of pressure. Another source of pressure is the economic pain that Israel has experienced. And in fact, there is a report that the fanatic Smotrich, the finance minister of Israel, this is from the Israeli press, plans to slash huge amounts of money from Israel's military budget in the forthcoming budget of the Netanyahu regime, which, if they're going to cut billions upon billions of shekels from the military budget, this hyper-militaristic state that, can't, it never turned down a war that it had an opportunity to pursue, that it is feeling considerable financial pressure and fiscal constraint. And of course, there is the immense support, escalating support being put on Western governments by civil society, poll after poll showing that support for Israel has plummeted, including the United States, and even including amongst young Republicans, the future leaders of the Republican Party. And there is, of course, the pressure being exerted by the legal system, the international legal system, and potentially domestic legal systems as well. And in that regard, I want to share with you a very important legal development that came out this week. After Israel's genocide began, the United Nations General Assembly asked the ICJ to render an advisory opinion on the following question: what are the obligations of Israel as an occupying power and as a member of the United Nations in relation to the presence and activities of the UN, including its agencies and bodies, and in relation to the occupied Palestinian territory, including to ensure and facilitate the unhindered provision of urgently needed supplies essential to the survival of the Palestinian civilian population, as well as of basic services and humanitarian and development assistance. And on October 22nd, Thursday of this past week, the ICJ rendered its opinion, and I'd like to take a closer look at it with you. And here you can see the operative part, the actual elements of its decision. So at the top there, it decided that Israel, as an occupying power, is required to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law. So it's affirming a decision it's already made more than once, that Israel is, in fact, an occupier for international legal purposes. And it goes on to decide unanimously that the Israel is required to ensure that the population of the occupied Palestinian territory has the essential supplies of daily life, including food, water, clothing, bedding, shelter, fuel, medical supplies, and services. And notice here, there's nothing about this being conditional on Hamas disarming or any other resistance group disarming. It's not conditional on the resistance handing over the bodies of all the Israeli captives who were killed in captivity, many of them killed by Israel, by the way. It's not conditional on Hamas or any other resistance group agreeing not to serve in government in the Gaza Strip or elsewhere in occupied Palestine. I've said this repeatedly. This is an obligation that Israel has, irrespective of anything that Hamas may say or do, or that any other resistance group may say or do. And so when the Western media and Western politicians frame this as being the fault of Hamas because they say Hamas didn't turn over some bodies or Hamas refuses to disarm. Well, first of all, their claims as a factual matter oftentimes are just false. For example, there's no indication that Hamas is withholding the bodies of dead captives, none whatsoever. And the international legal community has no right to deprive Palestinians of their right to engage in armed resistance against a genocidal regime. But even if you ignore that altogether, even if they were right that Hamas should disarm and that Hamas is withholding the bodies of dead captives, Israel would not be entitled to withhold humanitarian aid from the civilian population of Gaza. They then go on to say, this is Clause B up on the screen, by 10 votes to 1, that Israel must facilitate by all means at its disposal relief schemes on behalf of the population of the occupied Palestinian territory, so long as that population is inadequately supplied. So they aren't simply obliged to allow the aid to come in. They have a positive obligation to facilitate the delivery of aid as the occupier. And that includes allowing relief provided by the United Nations and its entities, in particular the UN Relief and Works Agency, which Israel has repeatedly accused of being, in effect, a terrorist organization, to operate in the Gaza Strip and to deliver such relief. The only judge who voted against this is this Ugandan judge, Sabutinde, who recently expressed the shocking view that she thinks, there's a divine obligation on the part of us all to support Israel. It's amazing that this lunatic remains on the International Court of Justice, but notwithstanding her presence there, the International Court of Justice has emphatically rejected Israel's vilification of the United Nations Relief Works Agency. Western governments, including the Canadian government, withdrew, at least on a temporary basis, financial support from UNRWA, which was keeping so many Palestinians alive in the Gaza Strip, based on Israel's preposterous claim that UNRWA was in effect a haven for Hamas terrorists. You can go on and read the rest of this opinion. It's rather lengthy. You'll see again and again, if you take the time to go through it, that Sebutinde, the Ugandan judge, dissents from a holding that every other judge on the ICJ supported. But this is another advance in the project of holding Israel legally accountable for its crimes. And of course, the genocide case continues to wind its way through the International Court of Justice, the case brought on behalf or by South Africa, and in which many other governments from around the world have since joined. So what is this decision going to do? Well, it certainly will apply moral pressure on Western governments to support UNRWA's activities, its vitally important activities, and to reject Israel's vilification of the organization. But ultimately, it would be up to the Security Council to enforce it. And of course, we can expect that the Trump regime will veto any attempt to enforce it. So we're a long way away from true legal accountability for the genocidal entity and its leaders, military and political, although we have made significant strides towards legal accountability. Now, on that note, let me turn to my arrest and detention in Amman yesterday. So, after being prevented from entering occupied Palestine by officials of the genocidal entity on Wednesday of this week, I decided to resort to Plan B. I'm here in Amman. I've been here once before, but I was only here for 24 to 48 hours and saw almost nothing of the country. And I decided to do some on the ground reporting here over the next several days. And the theme of my reporting was going to be the Israeli presence in the country and U.S. imperialism. And so I decided to start my report outside the Israeli embassy in Amman. And by the way, before doing that, I had already videotaped reports outside Israeli and other embassies in Western countries. I had done that, for example, I had done such a report outside the Israeli embassy in Athens, Greece. And, I will acknowledge frankly that on some of those occasions, the police questioned me. On one occasion, the police simply told me I couldn't do it. That's when I tried to film a report in front of the Israeli embassy in in Nicosia, Cyprus. But I've never been arrested as a result of having done that. So I made my way to the Israeli consulate in Amman. I'd never been there before. And just by way of background, Jordan entered into a peace deal with Israel in 1994 when Bill Clinton was the president. Under the deal, Jordan and Israel established full diplomatic relations. It also ceded any claim to the West Bank and East Jerusalem to the Palestinian Authority. Jordanian forces had seized control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem in 1948, around the time of Israel's creation, but lost control of them in the 1967 war when the Israeli occupation began. Since that time, almost immediately after the 1967 war, Israel began to build illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Jordan's autocracy has done essentially nothing meaningful to oppose those war crimes since that time. It has continued to maintain diplomatic relations with Israel throughout, and economic relations, and various forms of military cooperation. So, the Israeli embassy in Amman is a 5-story building. I think it's about 5 stories in a northeastern neighborhood called Arabia, which is an affluent part of the city. The embassy has been the site of numerous protests since the genocide began. Also, there was a shooting incident last year near the embassy in which a gunman approached the building, and when he was engaged by Jordanian police, he injured 3 of them before being shot dead. Members of the public cannot get close to the building without passing through security checkpoints. That was apparent to me when I walked near the building on a public street that's accessible to anybody. And at the point at which I began filming, I was about 100 meters or so, maybe 150 meters from the building. I couldn't see the front of it, the back of it. I could just see one side of it. There was, interestingly, no Israeli flag on the building. At least I couldn't see one from where I was situated, nor could I see any people going in and out of the building. And to get anywhere close to the building, you would have had to pass through, as I recall, at least 2 checkpoints. I made no attempt to get near the building, and I had no desire to do so. So standing on this quiet, publicly accessible street, I began filming an introduction to my report. I was immediately swarmed by about 10 police officers, some of whom were in plain clothes, some of whom were in uniform. And they immediately took from me my iPhone. They determined very quickly that I had videotape on it, which had the Israeli embassy in the background in the distance. And one of them told me that this was a closed military zone and that all photography was prohibited. When I was there, I saw no signs, at least none that I could understand, declaring this to be a military zone or prohibiting the use of photographic equipment. And I'm pretty sure there were no such signs because I looked to ensure that there's no indication that I was doing anything that contravened local laws. And One of these police officers actually spoke a reasonably good English. The others, as far as I could tell, didn't speak a word of English, so he was translating for them. And, I pulled out my passport. They demanded to see my ID. I informed them that I was a journalist. I told them about my YouTube channel, Reason to Resist. And I explained to them what I was doing. I even told them that I had attempted to enter occupied Palestine this week, but I had been prevented from doing that. And the reason why I felt it necessary to tell them that is because they were going through my passport and they noticed that there were multiple stamps in a very short period of time, recording my entry into Jordan. So I didn't want them to think that I was doing something suspicious coming in out of the country. And I said I'd made 2 attempts to cross into Palestine from the Allenby Bridge, and each attempt was unsuccessful. That's why there are 3 stamps showing 3 entries into Jordan over the past several days. And I explained to them that the reason why I was rejected, according to the Israeli I spoke to, was because, as he put it, everywhere you go against Israel. That's my best attempt at an Israeli accent. In any case, they gradually calmed down. I have to say, they weren't threatening. They didn't handcuff me. They didn't lay their hands upon me. I was very cooperative. They had no reason to do that, and they didn't seem inclined to do it. And the more I told them about what I was doing, the more they relaxed and became affable, friendly, really, by the end of our conversation. But they kept me standing there for about an hour and a half. And while I was standing there, other officers showed up, or security officials who were in plain clothes, and all of this had to be explained to them again. So after about an hour and a half standing there, and by the way, I should point out that the total number of police, I was counting them, the total number of uniformed and plainclothes police officers who interacted with me as I was standing in the street was 15 of them. So after about an hour and a half, they informed me that I would have to go to the police station. And they said, and this is something that I heard repeatedly throughout the day yesterday, that it was a little procedure, just a little procedure. You're just going to be there for a few minutes. So they take me to the police station, which was about a 20-minute drive away. They put me in a police vehicle. There's a police officer in the back with me and 2 in the front. And at no point did they handcuff me during this entire experience. And before I tell you what happened at the police station, just let me say that in a strange sort of way, I feel fortunate that this happened, because the journalistic value of what I saw and experienced at the police station, I think, is significantly greater than the journalistic value of me doing an introduction to my report 100 meters away from the Israeli embassy. I mean, I could just describe to you what I saw there, as I just did. And if you happen to be in Amman, you could go on the same street that I accessed and see for yourself what the Israeli embassy compound looks like. But what I saw at the police station is something you can only experience if you're either arrested or you're a cop. And it was quite interesting. So when I got to the police station, they took me immediately, these officers, to an office, and on the door was written in English, "Security Branch." And there was also Arabic. And they knocked on the door. A tall gentleman dressed in plain clothes answers the door, and there's a big desk there and couches, and he looked like, the big enchilada. And I later found out that he was the captain of the security branch, and the security branch, I was told, was the intelligence arm of the Jordanian police. So we sit down, and by that point, the one police officer who spoke fluent English had gone off to attend to something else. He actually didn't accompany us to the police station, and there were no other persons there who spoke reasonably good English, no other cops or security officials. So they weren't able really to understand much in the questioning in the office of the captain. And he ordered them to take me into the booking room to be booked, or at least to be registered in some way. Again, at no point did they put me in handcuffs. And when I go into this room, there is a counter, and on the other side of the counter, there's a couch, and then there's some desks on the other side of the counter as well. And they instruct me to sit on the couch right beside one of the desks, and there's an officer at the desk who put some kind of, I think it's something like a retina scanning device in front of me and tells me to look into it, takes a picture. Then takes my passport, writes down, he's putting a lot of information in the computer. And that goes on for about half an hour. And when I entered the room, I, uh, I noticed that there was only one person being booked, and it was, I would say, a 35-year-old woman from Bangladesh, and she looked quite frightened. And I later was able to exchange some words with her. She spoke very little English, but from what I understood, she did not have legal documentation to be in Jordan, and they took her away later on that day. They were treating her respectfully, but my sense was she was likely going to be deported from the country, and she was quite distraught about that. So they asked her to move aside when I entered. I sat down at the desk, went through that whole process, and then they put me in the clink. And the jail cell was actually in that same room where the bookings happened. It was a cell that was about 1 meter by 4 meters. There was a concrete slab that, as many as three people could sit on. There was no bed. There was no toilet. There was like this foam thing on the ground with a dirty blanket on it for those who were required to spend the night there. And they kept me in there for hours. And at that point, nobody was really able to explain to me, because of their incapacity to speak English, why I was being held in the jail cell. So after a couple of hours, the captain comes into the room, the one from the security branch, and he's accompanied by somebody else I hadn't seen in civilian clothing, who speaks fluent English. And they pull me out of the cell, and they take me downstairs into the basement, where the captain proceeds to interrogate me. And I learned that the individual who showed up is a professional translator from the Ministry of Justice of Jordan. And they proceeded to question me for about 45 minutes. In the middle of and one of them, so there's the captain, there's the translator, and there's a police officer who's writing all of this information in a computer. And in the middle of the interrogation, at a point in time where the captain seemed to be relaxed because of my explanation about what I was doing, seemed to put him at ease. He gets up and he leaves, and I'm told that he has to go attend to some other emergency. So now I'm in the room alone with the translator and the police officer who was taking notes of my statements. And when they finish asking me questions, I learned that the police officer who was taking notes, his mother is actually from Gaza, and he himself was born and raised in Jordan, has never been to Palestine. And the translator told me that his father is from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, and he too has never been to Palestine, even though it's right across the Jordan River. And both of them, particularly the translator, led me to understand that they were very sympathetic of my views. They asked me, "Why were you at the embassy?" And I said, "Look, I wanted my audience to understand that Israel has an embassy in an affluent neighborhood here, has had formal diplomatic relations, and I was going to express the view that Jordan should rupture all diplomatic relations with Israel and expel Israeli diplomats from the country because they are committing genocide." And when I said this, they both nodded emphatically and expressed their agreement with my view, which I thought was quite interesting. So after that happened, they took me back to the jail cell. And by this point in time, others began to show up. The Bangladeshi woman was gone, but various persons who had been apprehended for reasons unknown to me, all men, came in. And one particularly interesting person, he was quite small. He was in handcuffs, didn't speak any English. He came in and he was shouting and irate, and it looked like to me he had been in some kind of an altercation. I didn't know with whom. And he was accompanied by a taller fellow who spoke broken English. They sat down on the couch. They were booked. They were put in the cell. And then after they were put in the cell, another man came in handcuffs. And this man looked like, he looked like the Jordanian version of a Russian mobster. He was huge. Massive arms, tattoos all over his neck and his arms, a buzz cut, and The strange thing about him was although he looked very menacing, he was extremely deferential to the police and very soft spoken. And when he entered the room, the little guy who had been so animated when he was brought into the booking room started shouting. So, from what I could tell, the little guy had had an altercation with the big guy. And in fact, at one point, the little guy seemed to want to get out of the jail cell and start beating on the big guy. And throughout this entire time, the police officers were actually showing a lot of restraint. And they were interacting with all of these characters as though they knew them and as though they were friendly with them. And the strangest part of all is that at some point, actually at various points, they would allow us to exit the cell and just kind of lounge around in the booking room. We weren't allowed to leave the booking room, and then they would instruct us to sit down on the couch, and then they would put us back in the cell. They did this with all of the detainees over the course of those, 7 or 8 hours that I was at the police precinct. So as time went by, I began to become concerned because although the demeanor of the people there suggested was non-threatening, their demeanor towards me, I didn't really understand how this process worked. I've read human rights reports about repression of pro-Palestinian voices in this country, reputable human rights organizations. Now, I'll say this, that based on the human rights reports I've read, the Jordanian autocracy isn't nearly as bad as, let's say, Israel or the Saudi autocracy or the Egyptian dictator and certain other regimes in the region. But there is a considerable amount of documented evidence of severe repression of dissent within the so-called Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So I was, concerned about where this was all heading, and so I began to demand through this tall detainee who had come in after I came in, and who spoke broken English, that they allow me to contact the Canadian embassy to seek consular services. And every time I asked, they gave me some song and dance about how this was a little procedure, and I just needed to wait 5 more minutes, and they were going to let me go. It was all going to be fine. But the hour after hour went by, so I became more insistent. And at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening, I I demanded. I actually ended up raising my voice. I said, "I want to call the Canadian consulate now, and I have a right to do that, and you're impeding my right." So this was again translated for the attending officer in the booking room. And this time he seemed to take me seriously. I think he realized that he couldn't, put me off any longer. And so he asked me through this fellow who spoke broken English whether I had the phone number to the Canadian consulate. I said I didn't. I said, "I'd just give me my phone. I'll search it on Google." And he said, "No, I can't give you your phone." And at that point, he explained to me that the reason why I was being held was because there was going to be a forensic examination done of my phone, and they were waiting for the experts or the expert to show up at the precinct to do the examination of my phone, something that I wasn't going to consent to and had not consented to. And so he gives me his phone so that I can find the number of the Canadian consulate. I did that, and then he took us, myself, and the detainee who spoke broken English, into another office, and he starts calling the phone number of the Canadian consulate on a speakerphone. And at that point, the captain of the security branch comes rushing in and instructs the fellow who was dialing the Canadian consulate. We actually got through, and I could hear an automated message when this happened. And before I could respond or move on through the automated system to speak to a human being, the police officer who had dialed the number shuts the phone, and the captain of the security branch instructs them to take me into his office. We go into his office, and he decides in front of me that he's going to give me my cell phone back without the forensic examination being done. But he looks over my shoulder as I delete the video that I took at the Israeli consulate. And then he made me sign an acknowledgement that for the remainder of my stay here, I would comply with the laws of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. He said it is strictly prohibited to film any embassies, not just the Israeli embassy, any military facilities, any government buildings, to photograph them or videotape them. And he said, if I do it again while I'm here, not even the Canadian consulate will be able to prevent my imprisonment. And at that point, with a stern warning, I was permitted to leave. And the only other thing, a couple of sort of interesting, I guess, cultural details, you can call them, that I experienced in all of this was in every single room in that police precinct. I think they took me into like 5 or 6 different rooms at the end of it all. There were 3 photographs, one of King Hussein, the elder, the current king, and the son, who has been designated as the crown prince of Jordan, who will succeed to the current king. Every single room had these 3 big portraits, the same portraits. And as I was sitting there in the jail cell looking up at these portraits, I was just at one point I started seething with anger, because frankly, the whole thing wouldn't have happened if these autocrats had the decency to terminate their relations with a state that is committing genocide before the eyes of the world. There would have been no report in front of the Israeli embassy, because there would have been no Israeli embassy in Jordan. But it's very clear that who calls the shots in this country is the royal vassal of Washington. And sort of the other interesting cultural detail is, sitting down for so long, hour after hour, from time to time, I would cross my legs. I'd cross one leg over my other leg. And every time that happened, somebody would force me to put my foot down, both feet down on the ground. And when I was in the captain's office, at the moment, just a few minutes before he let me go, it happened again. As I was sitting on the couch, I put my foot over my leg. And I finally asked the guy who spoke broken English, who was brought in there to translate for the captain, why did they do this? Why do people keep telling me to put both of my feet on the ground? He said, because you're showing the bottom of your foot to the man sitting to your right. And that's extremely impolite. So if nothing else, I learned that is a no-no in this part of the world. In any case, I had intended to include in my reporting here information about the military facilities. There's one major publicly acknowledged military facility about an hour and a half from here, where both the Jordanian and U.S. militaries operate. And there's a secret military base near the border, I think it is, with Iraq, called Tower 22. And it came to light last year when 3 National Guardsmen stationed there were killed by a drone strike, and many more were wounded. So I was going to drive all the way out there, but in light of these developments, I don't think that would be advisable. Although I'm more than willing to go to jail for the cause of justice, I'd like to be confident that much more is going to be achieved than my simply getting some video footage, photographs of military bases. So I will do some on-the-ground reporting, but before I leave here in a couple of days' time, but I'm going to try to focus on other matters. So stay tuned. I'll be back to you with a further report from Jordan on behalf of Reason to Resist. For now, I'm signing off from Amman on October 24th, 2025.